What are you doing inside? This place is closed.
I'm finishing up for the night. I own a restaurant.
Put the cash down for a second.
That's tonight's earnings. My name is on that license right there.
Step away from the counter and keep your hands
You
visible.
misunderstand this. Just look at the license.
Officer Travis Cole, an 11-year veteran of the Rivergate Police Department, made the worst decision of his career the night he saw lights on Inside Oak and Elm Bistro well past closing time. It was 10:42 p.m., and the sign on the door clearly stated the restaurant closed at 10 o'clock. Through the window, he saw a black man moving between the counter and the kitchen. Cole didn't consider that someone might be finishing up for the night. In his mind, a closed business with someone inside meant burglary. He pulled into the nearly empty parking lot and watched for less than a minute before stepping out of his patrol car, his hand resting on his service weapon. The man inside was Elliot Grant, 46 years old and the owner of the bistro for 9 years. Long before that, he had started there as a dishwasher when it operated under a different name. Over time, he worked his way up, saved every dollar he could, secured a small loan, and eventually purchased the restaurant himself. He renovated it, expanded the menu, and turned it into one of Rivergate's most beloved neighborhood spots. That Saturday night had been busy. After his 2 employees left, Elliot stayed behind to complete his usual closing routine, counting the register, organizing receipts, checking inventory, and cleaning the kitchen one last time. The lights were still on because he was still working. The door was unlocked because he hadn't left yet, but when Officer Cole tested the handle and found it open, it confirmed what he had already decided. He pushed inside abruptly. 5 security cameras mounted throughout the restaurant captured his entrance in high definition. "Hands where I can see them," Cole barked as Elliot looked up in surprise. "Evening, officer," Elliot said calmly, setting down paperwork. "I'm just closing up. I own the place." "You own it?" Cole asked sharply. "Yes, Elliot Grant. The business license is right there." Less than 3 feet away, framed on the wall, hung the official city license listing Elliot as the sole proprietor. Cole glanced toward it but didn't actually examine it. He asked for identification instead. Elliot provided his driver's license, which showed his local address and matching name. "This doesn't prove you own the business," Cole said. "You could be lying." "I can show you tax documents, utility bills, whatever you need," Elliot replied, frustration creeping into his voice. At that moment, an elderly regular customer, Mrs. Lorraine Whitaker, entered the doorway after spotting the patrol car outside. "Officer, that man owns this restaurant," she said firmly. "I've been coming here for years." "Ma'am, step outside," Cole ordered. "This is police business." She hesitated but backed away, pulling out her phone as she stood just beyond the door. Inside, Cole ran Elliot's information. The result came back completely clean, no warrants, no record, nothing suspicious. That should have ended it, but Cole had already committed to the assumption in his mind. "Turn around," he ordered. "Hands behind your back." "You're arresting me?" Elliot asked in disbelief. "The license is on the wall. She just told you I own it." "Turn around now." Slowly, realizing arguing would only escalate things, Elliot complied. The metal handcuffs snapped tight around his wrists. 5 cameras recorded every second: the refusal to verify the license, the dismissal of a witness, the arrest of a business owner inside his own restaurant. In that moment, Officer Travis Cole didn't know it yet, but his career had just begun to unravel. Officer Travis Cole gripped Elliot Grant's arm and walked him toward the front door as if escorting a dangerous suspect out of a crime scene. Elliot kept his head up despite the humiliation burning in his chest. Outside, Mrs. Whitaker stood near the curb, her phone pressed tightly to her ear. "This is wrong," she shouted as the door opened. "He owns that restaurant." Cole ignored her. He guided Elliot to the back seat of the patrol car, placing a firm hand on the top of his head before lowering him inside. The heavy door shut with a final metallic thud. Through the window, Elliot could see the warm lights of his own restaurant still glowing. Inside, the place looked exactly as it should at closing time: clean counters, stacked chairs, organized receipts. Nothing about it resembled a crime scene. Cole returned to the building to secure it. He walked behind the counter and opened the register Elliot had just finished counting. The cash was neatly arranged by denomination, with a handwritten total prepared for the bank deposit. To anyone else, it was obvious bookkeeping. To Cole, it was confirmation of his version of events. He radioed dispatch. "Unit 32, 1 male in custody at Oak and Elm Bistro on Harbor Avenue. Possible burglary and trespassing, requesting backup to secure location." Within minutes, a second patrol car arrived. Officer Natalie Ruiz, younger and only 4 years on the force, stepped out. Mrs. Whitaker rushed toward her. "Please listen," the older woman said urgently. "The man in that car owns this place. The other officer made a mistake." Ruiz gave a cautious nod and entered the restaurant to speak with Cole. "What's going on?" she asked quietly. "Found him inside after hours," Cole replied. "Door unlocked, claims he owns it, couldn't verify." Ruiz looked around. Her eyes immediately landed on the framed business license on the wall. She stepped closer and read it carefully. Oak and Elm Bistro, license to Elliot Grant, valid and current. She turned back toward Cole. The license is right here, his name matches. Could be fake, Cole responded quickly. Could be stolen. I'm not taking chances. Ruiz walked into the small office near the kitchen. On the desk sat unopened mail addressed to Elliot Grant at that exact business address, utility bills, supplier invoices, bank statements. A framed photograph showed Elliot cutting a ribbon on reopening day years earlier, surrounded by city officials and smiling customers. She brought the photo out. This is him, grand opening, he's clearly the owner. Cole's jaw tightened. He had already called it in. Admitting a mistake now would mean embarrassment, maybe worse. I'm taking him to the station, he said firmly. They can verify everything there. Ruiz hesitated. She knew challenging a senior officer on scene could create problems for her, especially without formal proof beyond what she had seen. Reluctantly, she nodded. What do you want me to do? Lock it up. Treat it as a potential crime scene. Ruiz swallowed her discomfort and began turning off lights. She locked the door using the keys left on the counter, feeling uneasy about the entire situation. Outside, Mrs. Whitaker was still on the phone, her voice raised in anger. Yes, I'm telling you, they arrested him in his own restaurant. Cole returned to his patrol car and started the engine. Elliot sat silently in the back, wrists aching from the cuffs. He watched through the glass as the final lights inside his restaurant went dark. The drive to the station lasted 14 minutes. No one spoke. In the silence, Elliot thought about the security system he had upgraded 3 months earlier, 5 cameras recording continuously to cloud storage. He thought about Mrs. Whitaker witnessing everything. He thought about the license hanging on the wall that the officer had refused to read. Cole pulled into the underground parking area of the Rivergate Police Department, unaware that the decision he refused to reverse was about to follow him further than he ever imagined. The booking area at Rivergate Police Department was busy for a Saturday night. 2 officers were processing a DUI arrest, and another was finishing paperwork at the front desk when Officer Travis Cole walked in with Elliot Grant still in handcuffs. The desk sergeant, Sergeant Adrian Morales, a 23-year veteran of the department, looked up casually at first, then he froze. Elliot, Morales stood from behind the counter. What are you doing back there? Cole stopped mid-step. You know him? Morales gave him a sharp look. Of course I know him. I have breakfast at Oak and Elm twice a week. He stepped closer, his expression shifting from surprise to concern. What happened? Elliot's voice was steady but tight. Sergeant, I was closing my restaurant. Officer Cole decided I was burglarizing it. The room grew noticeably quieter. One of the other officers glanced over. Cole cleared his throat. He was inside after closing hours, door unlocked. Claimed ownership but couldn't prove it. Couldn't prove it, Morales repeated. His name is on the building. There was a business license on the wall, Elliot added. I pointed it out. Morales turned to Cole. Did you verify it? I saw it, Cole said defensively. Could have been fake. Did you call the number on it? No. Check property records. No. Morales exhaled slowly, clearly trying to stay composed. Officer, you arrested a business owner without confirming the most basic information. Before Cole could respond, the side door opened and Lieutenant Rebecca Lawson stepped in. She had been called in from home after hearing over the radio that a restaurant owner had been brought in under suspicious circumstances. What's going on? Lawson asked, scanning the room. Morales gestured toward Elliot. He says he was arrested in his own restaurant. Lawson looked directly at Cole. Walk me through this. Cole repeated his version of events, each sentence sounding thinner as he spoke. Lights on after hours, door unlocked. Suspicious movement, claimed ownership. Lawson listened without interrupting. When he finished, she asked calmly, did you confirm he owns the business? I used my judgment based on the situation, Cole replied. That wasn't my question, he hesitated. No, Lawson turned to Elliot. Mr. Grant, do you have documentation? Elliot nodded. 5 security cameras recorded everything, high definition, audio included. The license was clearly visible on the wall. A witness confirmed my identity. Morales blinked. It's on camera, every second, Elliot answered, including him refusing to check the license. The weight of that statement settled over the room. Lawson looked back at Cole. Uncuff him, Cole stiffened. Lieutenant, I still believe that's an order. Morales stepped forward and removed the handcuffs himself. Elliot rubbed his wrists, red marks visible against his skin. Lawson faced Cole again. You arrested a man inside his own legally owned business. You failed to verify documentation available within arm's reach, and this was all recorded. Cole said nothing. Elliot pulled out his phone and opened the security app. He selected the camera facing the counter and rewound to 10:42 p.m. The footage played clearly. Cole entering with his hand on his weapon. Elliot raising his hands. The framed license visible behind him. Mrs. Whitaker speaking up. Cole dismissing it all. No one in the room spoke while the video continued. The audio was unmistakable. The facts were undeniable. When it ended, Lieutenant Lawson's voice was controlled but icy. Officer Cole, you are suspended effective immediately pending internal affairs investigation. Badge and firearm. Cole's face drained of color. Slowly, he removed his badge and placed it on the desk, then his weapon. The room felt heavy, almost suffocating. Elliot looked at each of them in turn. His voice was calm now, almost clinical. "I will be filing a federal civil rights lawsuit, false arrest, illegal detention, violation of constitutional protections, and this footage will be made public." Lawson nodded once. She knew there was no argument to make. Elliot walked toward the exit without another word. Every officer in the room watched him leave, a free man who should never have been there in the first place. Behind him, Travis Cole stood silent, staring at the badge that had defined his life for over a decade. He didn't say it out loud, but he understood something in that moment. The arrest hadn't just humiliated an innocent man, it had ended his career. By Sunday afternoon, the security footage was everywhere. Elliot Grant had sent copies to 3 local news stations before noon and posted the full unedited recordings to his social media accounts with a detailed explanation of what had happened. He didn't exaggerate. He didn't dramatize, he simply let the cameras speak. They showed Officer Travis Cole entering Oak and Elm Bistro with his hand hovering over his weapon. They showed Elliot calmly explaining that he was the owner. They showed the framed business license hanging clearly behind the counter. They showed Mrs. Whitaker confirming his identity, and they showed Cole ignoring all of it before placing Elliot in handcuffs. By Monday morning, the video had surpassed 2 million views. National outlets began requesting interviews. Civil rights organizations issued public statements. Community leaders demanded accountability. The Rivergate Police Department's Public Information Office released a short, carefully worded statement acknowledging that an internal investigation was underway. It did little to calm public outrage. At City Hall, the mayor's office was flooded with calls. Several city council members, who had personally eaten at Oak and Elm Bistro, contacted Elliot directly to express their shock and support. The story had moved beyond a simple arrest. It had become a symbol of something larger. Internal Affairs opened a formal investigation first thing Monday morning. Normally, such reviews could take months. This one took less than 2 weeks. The evidence was overwhelming. The footage demonstrated clear policy violations, failure to conduct basic verification, improper escalation, and an unlawful arrest without probable cause. Investigators also reviewed Officer Cole's personnel history more closely than ever before. 17 prior complaints, 13 alleging racial profiling or unnecessary force. Several previously labeled inconclusive. In light of the video, those complaints looked different, not isolated, not coincidental, a pattern. 3 weeks after the arrest, Elliot filed a federal lawsuit in U.S. District Court. The complaint was extensive: false arrest, illegal detention, violation of 4th and 14th Amendment rights, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. The suit named both Officer Travis Cole and the City of Rivergate, seeking $650,000 in damages. Elliot's attorney held a press conference on the courthouse steps. Large screens displayed segments of the security footage while reporters took notes. The message was direct. This was not about a misunderstanding. It was about assumption overriding evidence. Behind closed doors, the city's legal department conducted its own assessment. Their conclusion was blunt: the case was indefensible. The video eliminated any argument of reasonable suspicion. The failure to verify obvious documentation created direct liability. Cole's complaint history compounded the risk. Fighting the lawsuit would likely cost more in legal fees than settlement, and a public trial would extend the negative coverage for months. 4 months after the arrest, the City of Rivergate agreed to settle for the full $650,000. The agreement included a formal written apology from the mayor and the police chief, delivered publicly at Oak and Elm Bistro during a packed lunch service. Cameras lined the sidewalk outside. When the mayor read the apology aloud, customers inside the restaurant applauded. Elliot stood calmly behind the counter, listening without expression. "I accept the apology," he said afterward. "But what happened should never have happened in the first place." 6 weeks after the settlement, Officer Travis Cole was officially terminated. The termination letter cited violations of departmental policy, failure to perform basic investigative procedures, unlawful arrest, and conduct unbecoming of an officer. Because he was dismissed for cause, Cole forfeited his pension benefits. His health care coverage ended. His law enforcement certification was suspended pending review by the state licensing board. He applied to departments in neighboring counties. None responded positively. The viral footage followed him everywhere. Within a year, Cole was working private retail security for $14 an hour. The badge he once wore with authority had become a symbol of professional collapse. In Rivergate, he was widely known as the officer who arrested a man in his own restaurant. Meanwhile, business at Oak and Elm Bistro surged. Customers lined up around the block in support. Elliot used part of the settlement funds to renovate the kitchen, expand seating, and add extended evening hours. He hired 4 new employees and created 2 management positions. The restaurant that had once been treated as a crime scene became a landmark of resilience. Police academies across the state began using the footage during training sessions. Instructors paused the video at critical moments, asking recruits what should have been done differently. The lesson was simple: verify facts before acting. Assumptions are not evidence. Elliot accepted invitations to speak at several of those training seminars. Standing in front of uniformed officers, he described what it felt like to be handcuffed inside his own business, while proof of his ownership hung inches away. Listen before you decide, he would tell them, because once you act, you can't always undo it. 5 years later, Elliot owned 3 restaurant locations. The original Oak and Elm Bistro remained the flagship. Near the entrance, the same framed business license still hung, but now beside it was a small plaque that read, "Evidence matters, assumptions don't." The lesson had been expensive, careers were lost, trust was tested, but the cameras never forgot. And neither did the community. The financial settlement closed the legal case, but it did not close the conversation. In the weeks that followed the public apology, Rivergate found itself divided. Some residents argued that Officer Travis Cole had simply made a mistake under pressure. Others pointed to the footage and asked a harder question: why was ownership the least believable explanation in the first place? Community forums were organized at local churches, schools, and civic centers. Attendance exceeded capacity at nearly every event. Elliot Grant was invited to speak at several of them, though he rarely used notes. He preferred to describe the night exactly as it happened, no embellishment, no anger, just facts. "I told him who I was," Elliot would say. "The proof was on the wall, a witness confirmed it." But none of that mattered because the decision had already been made. The phrase, "the decision had already been made," became a refrain repeated in news editorials and panel discussions. It captured something deeper than a single arrest. It described the moment when perception overrides verification. Meanwhile, Internal Affairs released a summary of its findings. The report concluded that Cole had failed to meet departmental standards for probable cause and neglected to conduct reasonable investigative steps before making an arrest. The report also acknowledged a pattern of prior complaints consistent with the behavior observed in the recorded incident. For many residents, that sentence carried the most weight. The pattern had existed long before the cameras forced it into the open. The department announced several policy revisions. Officers would now be required to verify business ownership through city records when feasible before making arrests involving alleged after-hours entry. Additional training modules on implicit bias and de-escalation were added to annual certification requirements. Supervisors were instructed to review complaint histories more rigorously. Whether those changes would last remained uncertain, but they marked a public acknowledgement that something had failed. As for Cole, the months after his termination were quiet. The state licensing board ultimately revoked his law enforcement certification. Without it, he could not work in any official policing capacity. He attempted to contest the revocation, but withdrew his appeal after legal fees mounted. Friends within the department distanced themselves, some out of disagreement, others out of self-preservation. In law enforcement, reputational damage spreads quickly. The viral footage ensured that his name would always be associated with that one arrest. Cole maintained publicly that he had acted in good faith, but in private, according to those who knew him, he rarely spoke about the incident at all. Elliot, on the other hand, faced a different kind of pressure. Increased visibility brought opportunity, but it also brought scrutiny. Every interview invitation required careful consideration. He refused offers that sensationalized the story or attempted to frame it as a spectacle. "This wasn't entertainment," he told one producer who requested dramatic reenactments. "It was my life." Business growth accelerated beyond what Elliot expected. Customers drove from neighboring counties just to shake his hand. Some left handwritten notes of encouragement on the counter. Others shared stories of their own experiences with profiling or mistaken suspicion. Elliot read many of them late at night after closing, long after the dining room had emptied. One evening, nearly a year after the arrest, Mrs. Whitaker sat at her usual corner table and stirred her tea thoughtfully. "You know," she said, "if those cameras hadn't been there," Elliot nodded slowly. "I think about that too. Without the footage, it would have been his word against an officer's report, a report likely written to justify suspicion, a narrative possibly accepted without question. The cameras had not prevented the arrest, but they had preserved the truth. Over time, Oak and Elm Bistro became more than a restaurant. It became a meeting place for civic discussions and small business workshops. Elliot partnered with a local nonprofit to host quarterly seminars teaching entrepreneurs how to protect their businesses. Everything from insurance literacy to surveillance systems and legal documentation. "Preparation matters," he would tell new owners. "Documentation matters and persistence matters." 5 years after the incident, Rivergate had changed in subtle but noticeable ways. Complaint oversight procedures were more transparent. Officers underwent more frequent review of body camera footage. Community advisory boards met monthly rather than quarterly. No system was perfect, but awareness had grown. Elliot sometimes stood near the framed license by the entrance of his original location and watched customers come and go. Children who once sat in booster seats were now teenagers ordering on their own. New families filled booths that once held only regulars. Above the license, the small plaque remained, "Evidence matters, assumptions don't." It wasn't placed there as a reminder of bitterness. It was a reminder of clarity. Officer Travis Cole's career had ended because he chose certainty over verification. Elliot Grant's future expanded because he chose documentation over silence. The story no longer belonged only to them. It belonged to a city that had witnessed what happens when bias meets accountability and accountability wins. The lesson endured. Assumptions can escalate in seconds. Verification takes minutes. Consequences last for years. As the years passed, the incident at Oak and Elm Bistro did not fade into obscurity the way many public controversies do. Instead, it evolved into a case study, one cited in legal seminars, police training academies, and small business conferences across the state. Law professors referenced it when discussing probable cause standards. Civil rights attorneys used it as a clear example of how video evidence can shift power dynamics in litigation. Even risk management consultants pointed to it when advising municipalities about liability exposure. For Elliot Grant, however, the case was never theoretical. He still remembered the sound of the handcuffs clicking shut, the cold bench seat of the patrol car, the sight of his own restaurant lights going dark while he sat restrained just outside. Those memories did not disappear simply because the lawsuit ended successfully. There were nights when he double-checked the locks more than necessary. Nights when a patrol car driving slowly past the bistro caused his chest to tighten before logic caught up with instinct. Trauma, he learned, does not always look dramatic. Sometimes it looks like vigilance. Despite that, he refused to let the experience define him solely as a victim. Instead, he leaned into expansion. 2 years after the settlement, he opened a second Oak and Elm location on the north side of Rivergate. A third followed 18 months later in a neighboring suburb. Each grand opening drew local officials, media coverage, and lines of customers stretching down the sidewalk. At every ribbon-cutting ceremony, Elliot made sure one thing was visible near the entrance: a framed copy of the original business license from Harbor Avenue, the one Officer Cole had dismissed. People would often pause to read the plaque beneath it. "Evidence matters, assumptions don't." It became more than a slogan, it became a brand philosophy. Meanwhile, policy reforms implemented after the arrest were tested in real time. Supervisors conducted more thorough reviews of arrest reports involving property crimes. Officers were required to document verification steps before charging individuals with burglary or trespassing in commercial settings. Body-worn cameras became mandatory department-wide within a year of the settlement. Funding for the expansion had been approved quickly, in part because city leaders understood how damaging undocumented encounters could become. Rivergate's police chief at the time publicly acknowledged that the department had relied too heavily on officer discretion without adequate accountability structures. It was an unusual admission, one that signaled institutional introspection rather than denial. Not everyone agreed with the reforms. Some officers felt micromanaged. Others believed public pressure had unfairly tarnished the department's reputation, but even among skeptics, few could argue against the clarity of the video evidence. As for Travis Cole, his life settled into quiet anonymity. Retail security work paid his bills, but it offered none of the authority he once held. Former colleagues rarely contacted him. When they did, conversations were brief and cautious. In interviews years later, Elliot rarely mentioned Cole by name. "It wasn't about destroying someone's career," he would say. "It was about correcting a wrong." Still, the consequences were real. Careers in law enforcement rely heavily on credibility. Once that credibility erodes publicly, rebuilding it is nearly impossible. 5 years after the arrest, a local documentary filmmaker produced a short feature titled Verification. The film focused on the role of evidence in protecting civil liberties. Footage from Oak and Elm Bistro appeared in the opening scene. Elliot participated in the project on the condition that the narrative remain factual, not sensational. The documentary ended with a simple shot of the original Harbor Avenue restaurant at closing time. Lights dimming, chairs stacked, Elliot locking the door himself. This time, no patrol car pulled into the lot. Instead, customers leaving the neighboring bookstore waved goodnight. The street felt calm, ordinary, safe. That ordinary calm was what Elliot valued most. The incident had brought money, recognition, and expansion. But what mattered more was stability. The ability to close his business at night without fear of being mistaken for a criminal in his own workplace. When asked during a community panel what lesson he hoped officers would take from his experience, Elliot answered without hesitation. Slow down, look twice, confirm once, authority is powerful. Use it carefully. The room had fallen silent after he said that because the truth was simple. The arrest had lasted less than 30 minutes. The consequences had lasted years. And the cameras, quiet, impartial, unblinking, had ensured that the facts could never be rewritten. 5 years after the night that changed everything, Oak and Elm Bistro was no longer just a neighborhood restaurant. It was a symbol, quiet but unmistakable, of what happens when evidence confronts assumption. Elliot Grant still closed the original Harbor Avenue location himself most Saturdays. He liked the routine. Stacking chairs, counting receipts, turning off the final light. The difference now was peace. No sudden confrontation, no hand hovering near a weapon, no accusation waiting behind the door. Near the entrance, the framed business license remained in clear view. Beneath it, the small plaque had become something customers often photographed before leaving. Evidence matters, assumptions don't. The city had moved forward. Police oversight was stricter. Verification procedures were clearer. Training programs referenced the incident not to shame, but to instruct. Officer Travis Cole's name had largely faded from headlines, but the lesson tied to it had not. Careers can end in minutes when authority replaces investigation. Trust can fracture instantly when bias overrides fact. Elliot's restaurants continued to grow. He employed dozens of people across 3 locations. He mentored young entrepreneurs. He funded scholarships for culinary students from underserved neighborhoods. When asked what ultimately defined that chapter of his life, he gave the same answer every time. It wasn't the arrest. It was what happened after. Truth held up, accountability followed. The story did not end with punishment or payment. It ended with clarity. Assumptions escalate quickly. Verification takes effort. Justice requires persistence. And cameras, when combined with courage, can change everything.